Lemresh, the court wizard's mansion, specifically his main lab, was a total disaster zone. Standing in the middle of a magic circle, dabbing blood from her mouth with a napkin, our heroine was late. Again. The girl was super pale after countless experiments, and she had massive bags under her eyes. She felt terrible for Xavier, who was counting on his fiancée to be able to turn back time. To seize the throne, he needed to go back to the past. Even His Majesty had always dreamed of it. That's why the prince was relying on Janisha, who was the most powerful mage in the entire kingdom. But the heroine knew that reversing time was impossible. No one had ever managed to pull it off. But her beloved insisted, gripping her shoulder so hard it actually hurt. They both knew how the rest of the court felt about Xavier, and for their happiness, he had to take the throne. Emperor Taskew, the ruler of the Giron Empire, had recognized the bastard as a member of the royal family, but he didn't pick an heir, so the princes behind his back started a real war for the throne. Janesia's fiancé was that very bastard, and he needed her help to grab the crown. For the heroine herself, that kind of power meant absolutely nothing. Still, she couldn't stand seeing Xavier suffer because of his own family. Her own family had all died from disease, and she, as a bastard daughter, just got super lucky. The prince sincerely hoped that she would definitely help him, and then they'd get married soon. But the heroine was way too weakened from trying to mess with time itself. But if she succeeded this time, she was sure that she and the prince would definitely find a cure for her. Gathering her thoughts, she weakly hobbled to her desk, pressing a tissue to her nose. Soon, her best friend ran to her, not understanding why Janisha was still in her lab. The heroine froze. Lisbel wasn't allowed here, and her friend wanted to go upstairs and have some hot tea with her. Later, chilling in the Lembrish Estate's living room, she found out the heroine was still working on that time travel spell. Looking at her chalk-white skin and lifeless eyes, her friend realized Genesiah was completely consumed by her work. The heroine figured His Highness must be bummed about it, since he hadn't visited her in ages. Lisbel decided not to take it personally. She was the most famous mage in Giron, after all, and a role model for tons of people. Thanking her for the kind words, Genesiah remembered they'd known each other for 10 years, since their academy days. Her best friend thought she should finally acknowledge her status and accomplishments. Finishing her tea, the girl didn't want to burden her friend any longer, and decided to head out. Suddenly, the heroine caught a whiff of an aroma coming from Lisbel, and it seemed really familiar. Her friend was surprised, and figured she'd overdone it with the perfume, but Genesiah just recognized the scent. When she heard they were spirits with the scent of dried roses, she was completely floored. Xavier had given his fiancée the exact same perfume for her last birthday. He'd said they were made exclusively for the imperial family. So now, totally rattled, Janisha needed to know where her friend got this perfume. Totally thrown by her expression, Lisbel figured she'd gone overboard with the scent. Thinking maybe similar perfumes were sold elsewhere, she was happy they liked the same scents. Super happy to hear that. Her friend immediately hugged Janesha, giving her a weary smile, wishing her sweet friend a good rest. The lady quickly took her leave. After that, closing her eyes peacefully, she remembered that rose scent again. Every time she smells it, she remembers Xavier, the one who taught her how to love. And now, Lisbel, her best friend who always had her back, popped into her head too. Genesiah knew she couldn't have done it without them, and she was determined to make them proud. To do that, she needed to focus completely on her research, so she buckled down at her desk until late. Crunching the numbers, she finally figured out what went wrong before. Thinking that things would definitely work out this time, she hurried to her lab to test her theory. But the second she got down to the basement, she froze in front of the entrance. The door was cracked open, but the light blazing inside was even more suspicious. Quietly approaching the door, she was horrified to see her fiancé and her best friend inside. The prince didn't get why they had to go through all this, when they could have just swiped the witch's research notes. Meanwhile, stuffing beakers from the table into a bag, Lisbel figured that would have been too cruel. Genesia's gonna be crushed that the research is gone, and she's already running out of time. Deciding she was being too nice to the main character, Xavier started hitting on her hard, digging that dried rose scent. Turns out, she sprayed herself while His Highness was still catching some Z's. The prince figured a hottie like Lisbel wears that scent way better than Genesia ever could. Not able to take it anymore, she stormed into the lab, dropping her research book in shock. Totally baffled, she had no idea what those two were doing there. Shaking with tears and hurt, she was shocked they not only stole her research, but were getting all handsy like animals. Glaring at her, Xavier was like, "Who the hell does she think she's calling animals?" Yelling back, Genesia couldn't believe they'd do this to her, after she trusted them so much. Enraged, she vowed she'd never forgive these people after that kind of betrayal. Seeing red, she went straight for Lisbel, grabbing her hair and making her scream. Then, just a couple seconds later, the hero caught a right hook square in the jaw from her fiancé. She went flying, smacked her head against the corner of the table, and blacked out instantly. The table wobbled, and the candle on it tipped, setting the papers ablaze and starting a raging fire. Resigned to watching his manuscripts burn, Xavier decided it was time for him and his mistress to get out of there. Meanwhile, the hero was slowly starting to come to, feeling warm liquid trickling down her head and tasting blood in her mouth. When she saw Lisbel refuse to leave and was heading her way, Genesia felt a flicker of hope in her eyes. But against all expectations, the lady picked up the book of research notes, smiling right at her friend. Thanking the hero for all these years and for this farewell gift, the girl happily returned to Xavier. They turned and started to walk away, leaving the betrayed sorceress in the middle of the raging flames. Genesia collapsed on the floor, totally spent, and felt her strength start to drain away. The fire was getting worse, closing in, but she refused to just die here. Girding her last bit of strength, she got on her hands and knees, feeling a sliver of magic still there. She dipped a soot-blackened finger in her own blood and started drawing a magic circle on the floor. It seems impossible right now, but she had to at least try to rewind time. The heroine was an illegitimate child in the Lembrecht family, and her birth was considered a curse. Her mom was a maid forced to sleep with the Earl, and the woman resented her daughter's very existence. Constantly hearing she was better off unborn, Genesia was often beaten. Her mother believed nobody loved the girl, and one day, she'd just be used and tossed aside. Later, a terrible disease wiped out the entire Lembrecht family in a short time. As the only one left alive, she inherited the title of Countess Lembrecht. Remembering the burning of her family's bodies, twisted by disease, Genesia knew her life had always been hell. Suddenly, a weird feeling came over her, and the heat from the flames started to fade. Her head stopped throbbing, and her eyes were closed like she was asleep, and then she heard a familiar voice. Feeling her strength returning, she jumped up, totally confused. She was sitting at her desk in the lab when the butler walked in. His name was Lance Million, and he was super worried that she'd stayed up all night working again. Realizing she'd actually gone back in time, Genesia needed to know what the date was. Not understanding what the heck was going on with her today, the butler hurried to tell her the date. Turns out, she'd gone back to exactly 1 month before her engagement to Xavier. The girl wasn't even sure if it'd work, but she was back to normal. Barely holding back tears, she'd actually pulled off a time-bending spell. Her lab was completely intact and looked pretty damn clean. When she noticed her notes were back too, Genesia totally flipped out. Suddenly, she remembered the faces of Lisbel and Xavier, who betrayed and murdered her. Her lips tightened with rage. The girl swore she'd never forgive them for what they did. Just thinking about the past made her sick. So to clear her head, she went for a walk in the garden. Hearing someone call out to her, she instantly recognized that disgusting voice that made her want to puke. Greeting his future bride with a smile, the prince was thrilled to bump into her in the garden. He gently took her hand, but Genesia recoiled, snatching her hand away. Thinking it was just a fluke, the hero was stoked to tell her he'd gotten a dress ready for the upcoming ball. But when she said she already had an outfit, Xavier was totally thrown. Knowing she's usually way quieter, the prince wondered if he'd somehow pissed her off. She didn't say anything, wanting to let him have it, but she was too furious to even speak. Suddenly, the butler showed up, happy to have found his lady. He was quick to explain to His Highness that the lady hadn't slept all night, working on her research. Realizing he was tired of trying to please her, Xavier just gave her a smile. Then he shot a nasty look at Lance, not understanding how some butler dared to interrupt them. Raising his hand, the prince wanted to punish the servant for his incompetence, acting for his lady. Right then, Genesia remembered the time he slapped her across the face, as hard as he could. So now Xavier's gonna pull the same crap on Lance, who didn't even do anything wrong. Jumping right between them, shielding the butler, she figured anyone who lays a hand on her staff lays a hand on her. She just didn't get it. Was His Highness really showing his true colors like this? Turning on his heel, she walked off with the butler, leaving the prince totally bewildered and shocked. Completely wiped from the day, she knew Xavier could find his own way back. Back at the estate, she found out Lance was okay, while Lisbel was spying on them from behind the bushes. Knowing her friend used to bend over backwards for Xavier, she couldn't figure out when she changed so much. Later, while pouring his mistress tea, the butler learned she was planning to call off the engagement with the prince. She knew he'd want to know why she made that decision, and she had no idea what to tell him. But Lance just smiled at what she said. totally understanding the Countess's decision. He figured, as head of the Lembrish estate, she always had to be on her toes. The problem was, a gentle no to His Highness just wasn't gonna cut it. Lance thought maybe she could set her sights on some young buck from a prominent noble family, but she knew whoever she ended up with, people wouldn't want her, just the blood she carried. Besides, if the Emperor backed her and Xavier, nobody would dare cross him or come after her with proposals. She needed a rock-solid reason to break the engagement, and the butler only had one guy in mind. They were talking about Prince Kalyan, Gyron's second in line, whose broken engagement was the talk of the town. He wasn't interested in marriage, and rumor had it he was stoked about calling it off, which really pissed off the royal family. Now, getting why the royal family was so tense, Janisha figured this guy might actually understand her. She took a satisfied sip of tea, deciding she'd be paying the second prince a visit real soon. The next night was eerily quiet. You couldn't even hear the wind outside. Silently sliding open the balcony door, someone slipped into Kalyan's bedroom, leaving dark footprints on the floor. Approaching the bed, the cloaked figure saw the sleeping prince's head peeking out from under the covers. Pulling out his dagger, he grinned like a maniac and raised it over the helpless body. He plunged the knife straight into His Highness's back, the assassin naively thinking his job was done. But, seeing no blood, he yanked off the blanket and only saw Kalyan's clothes. The prince himself then stepped out from behind him, pointing his blade at the guy's neck. First things first, the hero wanted to know exactly who sent this killer into his chambers. Kalyan von Heinze-Duran's patience was wearing thin, and it'd be better for the assassin to confess right now. Later, Genesia arrived at the central hall of the Ministry of Magic. Place was packed as usual, and as soon as she got inside, she started scoping it out. Court wizard Cedric Windsor spotted her at the entrance and hustled right over. He was dying to ask her about that magical pulse they'd talked about before. Handing her a book of his research notes, the dude wanted her to describe the pulse in there. That got the heroine wondering, was he seriously not worried she'd snoop on his project in those notes? But Cedric was sure she'd never do that, which Lisbel, who just walked up, totally agreed with. The girl also thought Genesia would never stoop that low. I mean, even back in college, she was famous for being kind and honest. Though, of course, she got way more famous for her magical skills. Turning to the heroine, the fake friend hoped she agreed with what she said. Janisha just gave her a cold stare and decided to say nothing. Her own mother had cursed her from birth, convinced no one would ever love her. Everyone just mocked and scorned her, blaming her for bringing sickness to her own family just to become the top dog. Lisbel was the only one who reached out to her, becoming a ray of sunshine in her life. But that rosy picture turned out to be nothing but a fake illusion. Burning alive in that lab, the truth finally hit her. She saw the world for what it really was. So now, she yanked her hand away from her fake friend, which totally threw Lisbel off. Confused about what was going on, Lisbel hoped Janesha would spare her a minute. She was hoping for the hero's help with giving a lecture, while she had to get Lord Cedric's paperwork ready. Janesha could have turned it down, but she just had a pretty good idea. So, it was a lecture for the second prince, and lucky for us, the court mage agreed to team up with the heroine. When she said yes, Lisbel was stoked, knew she couldn't resist. She chuckled, thinking the heroine was a real sweetheart. Just then, her alarm went off, and after saying her goodbyes, she rushed off to handle her business. Stepping out onto the porch, she sprinted towards the meeting spot, hoping she wasn't late. The lady had wasted too much time with those two, and the hero might have just bailed. Hiding behind a pillar, Lisbel breathed a sigh of relief seeing Xavier was still there. Stepping out to greet him, she cheerfully said hello to His Highness, who was equally happy to see her. He was also super grateful for the embroidered handkerchief with his signature design she made him. Turning bright red, the girl wondered if maybe she'd gone a little too far. But the prince thought that scarf was gorgeous, reminded him of his mom. Figuring fate brought them together, he hoped the lady would spare him some time. Sitting on the bench, listening to his story about his last run-in with Genesia, she acted shocked. Xavier decided the heroine was ice cold to him, like she didn't need a prince like him. Totally thrown, Lisbel realized she wasn't imagining things the other day. Looks like Genesia has no clue how to act around royalty, period. What bugged the girl the most was when she started bragging about Prince Xavier. Once, the heroine showed her a little box, gifted to her personally by the prince. To Genesia, it meant he truly loved and cared for her, so Lisbel decided to take him from her forever. And now, she felt genuinely sorry for Xavier, who was so good to the heroine, only to get treated like dirt. If she were in her friend's shoes, she'd never be that clueless and rude to him. Taking her hands, The prince wondered aloud what the lady would do in that case. With a sultry sigh, Lisbel was ready to do anything, His Highness asked. That same day, in Prince Kalyan's drawing room at the Winter Palace, Cedric and Genesius were getting ready for the lecture. The court mage decided to give the girl some advice. You gotta respect the second prince. He fights monsters at the border, and get this! Nobody died. Kalyan came back without a scratch. That's why a lot of people call him the devil incarnate. But the royal knights revere him as a top-tier swordsman. Suddenly, the doors swung open, and the prince strode into the living room, flanked by his loyal servants. An order rang out to greet His Highness, the second Prince Giron, after which the heroes bowed respectfully. Cedric introduced himself as today's lecturer, while Genesius Lembreche would be his assistant. The hero didn't react to what they said, just fixed a cold stare on the heroine. She smiled back, knowing this guy wouldn't be an easy mark, but he was exactly what she needed. The lecture started, and Cedric launched into a long-winded speech about magical arts. Tuning it all out, the hero had lost count of how many times someone had tried to off him, and he wasn't sure if it would ever end. Meanwhile, according to the court mage, Earth was the toughest element to control. There were only 9 wizards in the world who could manipulate Earth, and Lady Lembreche was one of them. Hearing that, the prince looked up, lost in thought, and stared intently at the heroine. To his surprise, Janesha winked with a smile and pointed at something. Confused, Kalyan suddenly realized she wanted him to look down. Glancing at the table in front of him, he saw a book, noticing a folded piece of paper between its pages. After cracking it open and reading what was inside, he suddenly decided to call it quits with lectures for the day. Thinking the class was a real blast, he ordered Lady Lembreche to follow him, pronto. Obeying his command without a peep, she was relieved it wasn't as hard as she thought it would be. He stopped dead, and she slammed right into his back, knocking her glasses clean off her face. Kalyan figured he could have just blown off the note, but right now, he was backed into a corner. The prince was baffled by her question on the paper, asking if he was tired of all the assassination attempts. Smiling back, Janesha wanted to strike a deal with His Highness. Picking up her glasses from the floor, she figured she could protect him from those assassination attempts. In return, she wanted to pretend that she and the prince were actually a thing. Coughing, totally embarrassed, Kalyan couldn't figure out why she picked him for this. Turns out, the whole deal was because he's a smart, cold-blooded, and ruthless dude. In other words, he was exactly the kind of guy the lady was so desperately searching for. The heroine wasn't interested in love or marriage, and she also didn't want people exploiting her magic. Instead, she just wanted to study magic and dedicate her entire life to it. All she wanted from His Highness was protection for exactly 1 year. The prince still didn't get how she planned to stop the upcoming assassination attempts. Hearing that she could predict them with magic, the hero was already thinking about it, but they never gave him a straight answer. However, the prince just never asked Genesius directly about the issue. Before her time jump, Kalyan lost his right arm in an explosion. After 167 attempts, he finally went to the magic ministry and ordered them to make him a protection device. They couldn't do anything back then, but things are going to be totally different now. Genesia personally crafted this magic ring she wanted to give him. If danger's close by, it'll start glowing with a crimson light. The prince has got nothing to lose by taking it, and the heroine hoped he'd give her a shot. With that, she left him, and soon after, his attendants came in. The servants overheard the whole conversation and thought this lady's offer was super shady. They figured you can't trust mages at all, 'cause they'll stab you in the back the first chance they get. The guards were ready to toss her out right then and there, but instead, they got orders to tail her. There wasn't a trace of fear in her eyes, but they were overflowing with determination. Plus, there was something familiar about this sorceress, something that made the prince want to trust her. Besides, she nailed it when she said he's got nothing to lose, so why not give it a shot? Meanwhile, as Genesee walked through the palace grounds, she decided it wasn't as scary as she'd thought. At least this guy actually listened to her, unlike all the other phonies. Suddenly, Xavier and Lisbel popped up right in front of her, making her jump. Turns out, these so-called friends heard about her meeting with the second prince and came here hoping she was okay. They found out about the meeting from Cedric, who ran into them by accident, totally freaking out. Not seeing why they were all still standing around, the prince invited his pals to the gazebo for some tea. He decided to brag about using magic to secure the garden, so now blue roses bloom here all year round. The court mage knew keeping up a garden like that had to cost a fortune, but according to the prince, money's no object. Taking a calm sip of tea, the heroine knew that was total BS, since Xavier blew all his cash on himself. He was so caught up in the idea of blowing people away with his giant palace, He totally forgot about the estate. It all led to major money problems. And in the end, the fancy prince turned out to be a total phony. It got so bad, he couldn't even afford to pay his own staff properly. Giving Xavier a subtle kick, Lisbel decided this amazing palace said a lot about its owner. She was blown away by how lucky her precious friend was with her fiancé. Thinking Genesia was incredibly fortunate, the lady also wished she could meet someone like His Highness. After those words, Cedric jumped up suddenly and ran off, pretending he remembered something important. Smiling, the prince remembered his future bride could control all 4 elements and was even a star at the academy. The lady remembered all of her friends' student years, who, according to her, only knew magic. All the other students were jealous of her and completely ignored her, so the girl was always alone. Everything flipped when she and Lisbel became friends, though. Genesia remembered overhearing her friend's conversation with other students, who were all like, "Why's she hanging with that witch?" Turns out, Lisbel just didn't want the heroine cursing everyone who pissed her off. Hearing that she was just using her for the greater good totally froze her in her tracks. Ever since then, she figured her friend had some hidden agenda, but she always looked the other way. She knew she was nothing to her, and Genesia wasn't gonna take that crap anymore. The heroine remembered them always working together on experiments, and how Lisbel struggled with the changes. The lady was always surrounded by friends she could ask for help, but she never did. Genesia felt good knowing she was the only one who could help her friend at the academy, even though there were a couple of classmates who thought the witch was just wasting her time. Taking a sip of her tea with a smile, she was betting Lisbel remembered them. She was talking about those 2 guys she was seeing at the same time. Turning blue from shock and embarrassment, the girl shot up and slammed her hand on the table, saying that wasn't true. Chuckling nervously, she figured their relationships barely overlapped and Genesia must be mixed up. Shaking all over, she couldn't believe the heroine would say something like that in front of His Highness. Smirking, the heroine quickly pretended she must have gotten her wires crossed. Figuring everyone makes mistakes, the prince invited the ladies for a walk in the garden. He walked ahead with his future bride, and Lisbel trailed behind them like a lost puppy. Gritting her teeth with rage, she couldn't believe Genesia would do that to her. Walking with her head held high, the heroine had apparently completely forgotten her place. So, deciding to remind her sweet little friend just how worthless she was, the lady felt pretty damn sure Genesia would never outshine her. Back in the day, during one of their alchemy classes, Lisbel's potion just randomly blew up. Everyone immediately started feeling sorry for her and blaming the whole thing on our girl, calling her a total waste of space. Remembering she'd brought illness on the family, everyone figured Genesia had deliberately smashed the girl's test tube. But all our girl did was kindly advise her not to mix those particular potions. But every time she gave advice like that, Lisbel took it as her friend putting her down and did the exact opposite. Suddenly, the lady jumped to her defense, deciding that Genesia hadn't done it on purpose. Now, our girl realized that her so-called friend was trying her hardest to make her suffer. And right now, she probably wanted revenge for our girl bringing up those guys at the tea party with the prince. Putting her hand on her shoulder, the girl was about to say something, but Genesia suddenly brushed it off. Lisbel twisted her ankle, ate dirt right in front of her, and scrambled up on all 4s. Spotting the partially faded magic rune underneath her, the girl was totally thrown. She was like, "No way! Is this the same spell the prince was bragging about?" Suddenly, the rune flickered, and all the blue roses Xavier was drooling over turned plain red. Seeing that, our hero freaked out hard and went pale as a ghost. Lisbel, scared witless by his reaction, jumped to her feet and tried to explain herself. Coming up to her, the heroine didn't want His Highness to pressure the girl. She definitely didn't do it on purpose. Turning to her fake friend with a smile, she hoped this really was an accident. The prince half-heartedly agreed there was no problem, and Genesia knew he'd understand. Lisbel had nothing to worry about. After all, there's nothing money can't fix. The prince was loaded, and the heroine was betting he'd fix the rune in days. She laughed, stoked that everything was working out so damn easily. Alone with Lisbel, Xavier remembered her saying she'd do anything for him, and right now, he seriously hoped. This wasn't what she meant by anything. Horrified by what he said, she screamed, calling the whole thing absurd and a misunderstanding. I mean, even if you think about it, how could you just erase a rune that easily? She was convinced Genesia had framed her. She was behind this whole thing. Yelling back, the prince called her words BS. That klutzy idiot would never stoop that low. Suddenly, a terrifying thought hit Lisbel, and she remembered the heroine acting weird lately. It was like she'd become a totally different person, giving her the creeps. Remembering how Genesia suddenly shut down his advances, The prince had to agree with the lady, wanting to help him get to the bottom of things. Lisbel was planning to tail her friend at the ministry and report anything weird. She hoped Xavier would trust her with this, cause she'd take the job seriously. Looking at her, the prince couldn't help but remember something that happened a few months back. Back then, there was this huge banquet at the Imperial Palace, and the hall was packed. Seeing Janisha there, he was like, "What's this hick doing here? And how did she even get in?" Just seeing her killed Xavier's appetite, even though he was holding a glass of some seriously good wine. Spotting him staring at the girl, some lord figured His Highness had a nose for talent. Turns out, that unassuming lady was the youngest of the court mages, and the strongest. Most mages can only control like one of the 4 elements. But get this, to everyone's shock, the heroine totally mastered all the elements at once. She doesn't even need magic stones to draw runes, and she even made the lord a wooden arm prosthetic. Hearing that she's a freaking star in the magic world, Xavier realized she's the one he needs. The Emperor decided that if the bastard can find him a way to go back in time, only then will he name him his successor. And apparently, Genesia Limbresh was the very person who could help him turn back the clock. So now, he gladly accepted Lisbel's offer to snoop on the heroine a bit and find out what's up. Grabbing the girl's hands, he was ready to trust her completely, but just this once. Meanwhile, the heroine was happily bouncing toward her lab, humming a cheerful little tune. She just needed to tweak the rune a bit beforehand, and everything went off without a hitch. Feeling like a huge weight had been lifted, she suddenly spotted someone at the entrance to her research center. A hood hid the guy's face, and not knowing what he wanted, Janisha marched right up to the stranger. Figuring he was in the right place, the dude grinned, turned to her, and pulled down his hood. As he did, the heroine was stunned. She recognized him instantly and got all flustered. It was Manuel Sieta, blonde hair, golden eyes, and also on the Academy's junior field team, totally stoked about this long-awaited reunion. Later, sitting with him at a table, she gave him some ice cream and found out the second prince sent him to spy on her, which was pretty wild. Her offer to Kalian was pretty out there, and he wanted to know if she had some hidden agenda. Only vetted mages can get into the ministry, and our guy was the only spellcaster hanging around the second prince. Of course, she didn't expect him to believe her right off the bat. But would a spy just spill his real motives like that? Of course not. That's not how it works. And usually, Manuel should never have been caught. But he decided things were different with her, so he confessed his doubts to his boss. Kalian let him confide in Genesee, but only if the hero reported back to him on absolutely everything, down to the smallest detail. Hearing that, the heroine knew this was a golden opportunity to prove her worth. She decided to confess she was currently studying restoration magic, but Manuel knew nobody had ever succeeded at it before. But then, right before his eyes, Genesee restored the ice cream he'd eaten earlier. Technically, it's not restoration, but time displacement, and she figured that out when she teleported herself. The hero was blown away that her talent and creativity were enough to come up with something like that. Not all mages were capable of that, so she hoped her old friend would put in a good word for her with the Lord. Looking at her with a smile, the hero realized she was still as amazing as ever. Later, Manuel found out she switched faculties pretty quick, thanks to Lord Windsor. Meanwhile, Genesee spotted the sword he was carrying and learned that the hero was being trained by the one and only swordmaster, Kalian. Realizing just how much he respected His Highness, she mentally compared it to a puppy's love for its owner. But aside from the dude, he also had genuine respect for her, which kinda threw her for a loop. She remembered that his older brother, Lopez, was like the golden child of the Sieta family. Always in his brother's shadow, Manuel was super quiet and even kinda gloomy back in the academy. Turns out he's actually pretty upbeat, and now he's wondering why Janesha doesn't just magically fix her eyesight. The glasses didn't bother her, and she didn't get the question. But turns out, the guy just wanted to see her without them. He saw her face, turned bright red, and decided they should probably grab some grub. Next thing you know, they're in the ministerial dining hall, and Janesha decides to treat her spy friend. She loaded his plate with tons of meat dishes, wanting him to eat well and get his strength back. But before they could even dig in, Lisbel shows up with a plate of salad. The main character was totally thrown by her showing up, because she figured after the garden thing, the girl wouldn't come within a mile of her. Lisbel was confused why her friend started eating without her, and also surprised to see the hero hanging around. Grinning like a Cheshire cat, she wondered if Prince Xavier knew his fiancé was having lunch with another dude. Without even batting an eye, Janesha shoved a piece of meat in her mouth and decided she didn't give a damn. Totally stumped by her answer, the girl couldn't figure out why she was acting so rude. After greeting the young lady, Manuel Sieta quickly clarified that he'd be assisting Lady Limbresh from now on. Introducing herself back, Lisbel decided she was an assistant too, and since he was younger than Janesha, she'd treat him like a little bro. But the hero figured, since they were both assistants, they should probably keep things professional with each other. Having heard about Lord Lopez Sieta's impeccable manners, the girl couldn't say the same for his younger brother. Manuel figured if she wanted to network with the Sietas, she'd have better luck with his brother, since he's easier to get along with. And another thing, she needs to get it through her thick skull to show the Lord some respect. Lisbel only played nice with that scumbag, 'cause he's a Sieta, even though it made her blood boil. Plus, she's barely touched her food lately, so how dare Janesia pig out like that? Giving her friend a smile, the girl figured she could pack on some serious pounds eating like that. Deciding a salad was the better option, she dumped the contents of her plate onto Janesia's. She'd planned on saving it for herself, but was willing to share with her friend. Just then, a knife zipped past her face and slammed into the table, freaking Lisbel right out. Watching her act like that, the hero completely lost respect for the Kendall family. From now on, she better learn that leftovers were only ever left for the slaves. So, they decided to leave the ladies' food on the table and grab a bite to eat in the lab. As Manuel left, he figured Lisbel could use some lessons on how to act in public. After grabbing some sandwiches, they sat down at the lab table, and he apologized for losing his cool. He also found out she only proposed to the second prince because of who he is. He felt ashamed and sorry he wasn't someone she could turn to for help. So, he decided to do everything he could to make sure she made a deal with His Highness. Later on, Manuel brought the boss the latest report from his surveillance. He managed to discover that Janesha wants to turn down Prince Xavier before he even proposes. As for him, he'd known her since the academy and thought Lady Limbresh was a great person, inside and out. Besides, out of all the mages, Manuel respected Janesha the most. The second prince was eating up these sweet words, hoping reality matched the hype. Just then, the maid knocked and came in, bringing His Highness some wine. She had a knife hidden behind her back, and at the same time, the ring on Callion's finger started glowing crimson. Remembering what the heroine said, he immediately ordered Manuel to lock down all the doors. Hearing that they had a hired assassin here, the maid was completely thrown off. Grinning as he drew his sword, the prince also ordered them to tell Janesia that their deal was done and he'd be visiting soon. Lisbel was always the center of attention, while everyone thought the heroine was trash. Taking advantage of that, she looked even more stunning next to her friend and got tons of love and gifts. Janesia would also give her any magical item she asked for. Once, the girl hinted to her friend about a new tailor shop that opened near the Lembresh estate. A few days later, Lisbel received a bunch of new dresses from her as a gift. She honestly thought the heroine was a total nobody before she showed up. But now she's gone way too far, and the girl's done playing nice. Now Lisbel isn't just happy taking Prince Xavier, she wants to take it further. She's planning on taking everything from her friend, so she'll have no choice but to crawl back. Hearing from her that Manuel Sieta became Janesia's assistant, the prince was seriously puzzled. He couldn't understand. Did the heroine change her mind about him because of another guy? But he didn't care, because some pathetic aristocrat was nothing compared to royalty. So right now, he wanted to hear all the news again, to rethink everything and start acting. Meanwhile, Janesia was ecstatic when she learned that His Highness Calion had agreed to the deal. She figured she wouldn't have managed anything without Manuel, but he was sure it was her ring that won the prince over. When they heard the knock, they figured it had to be the second prince showing up. But then a voice boomed out, announcing Prince Xavier's arrival and his desire to meet Lady Limbresh. Not having a clue what he wanted, she was totally blindsided by his sudden visit. She went to meet him, and a ton of gawkers gathered around, confused about this bride business. No way was Janesha his bride, unless she slipped him a love potion in his tea or something. After greeting His Highness, she had to know what brought him all the way here. To her surprise, Xavier didn't answer, just dropped to one knee and gazed longingly into her eyes. He held out a ring box, ready to propose and make her his wife. Hearing him swear to make her life happy, Janesha got the serious shakes. Feeling dizzy, she couldn't wrap her head around why this was all happening so fast. Back then, she took his words at face value, giving him everything and then some. But Xavier ended up ditching her without a second thought, crushing her heart and soul. So now, she couldn't accept His Highness's ring, because she only wanted to marry for love. Blindsided by that confession, the prince just stared at Janesia, totally dumbfounded. The heroine decided to clarify that not only did she not love him, but his love wasn't genuine either. Calmly starting to turn away, she hoped he wouldn't do something like this again, which totally sent Xavier over the edge. Deciding she shouldn't try to downplay his feelings for her, the prince already knew about her secret lover. Completely thrown by his words, she didn't understand anything, but Lisbeth thought she should drop the act. The girl, like His Highness, knew what Lady Lembreche was up to behind the prince's back, and as her friend, she couldn't stay silent anymore. Hearing that she was secretly hooking up with the Lord's brother and playing the Honorable Xavier for a fool, Genesia was seriously confused. The crowd immediately started blasting the main girl for juggling two guys and backing Lisbeth all the way. They didn't get it. The guys were just after her for what she had, and everyone would be stoked if Genesia finally paid for her crap. The fake friend expected an apology, but our girl just said she had feelings for another dude, and they were already engaged. Besides, Prince Xavier never even hit on her, so how could she cheat on someone she wasn't even dating? Plus, His Highness was practically begging her for a chance. Hardly what you'd call courting, right? Losing it at what he heard, Xavier screamed and swung at the shameless woman. Blocking the blow, Kalian demanded his stepbrother explain himself. He couldn't believe this moron would dare raise a hand to his fiancée, which totally threw Xavier for a loop. Thinking the second prince was a total jerk, he remembered chasing Lady Lembreche for a whole month. Never saw her with him, though. Finding out he was stalking his fiancée, Kalian went ballistic and started closing in on the prince. Xavier, freaked out by his stepbrother, demanded the heroine finally spill the beans. The second prince stepped up too, wanting Genesia to tell everyone about their first meeting. Specifically, she had to flash the ring and call him by name in front of everyone. Knowing she didn't have a choice, the heroine just knew she had to get through this. Showing everyone the ring, she acted like they'd met at Cedric's lecture, and Kalian confessed that same day. According to him, it was true love at first sight, and destiny itself had brought them together. Xavier was so shocked by what he heard, it even messed up his character design. Equally low quality, Lisbeth was stunned that this cold-blooded jerk could fall in love at first sight. Kalian himself remained totally unfazed, making it clear with his whole vibe that that's exactly how it went down. Later, sitting across from him in the carriage, Genesia told His Highness how truly grateful she was. Turns out Manuel tipped him off, and the second prince got there as soon as possible. Plus, they agreed to drop the formalities, so she could call him by his first name. They were headed to the Lembreche estate to grab her stuff. Then they'd both go to the Winter Palace. Totally caught off guard by that, Genesia was like, "Why all this?" That's when he reminded her of her promise, to protect him from assassination attempts, which basically means they're gonna be stuck with each other for a whole year. Of course, she remembered her promise, but she didn't see the need for all this at all. So Kalian wanted to know, did she have any idea when people usually let their guard down? Without even a second thought, she figured it was during meal times. But according to the second prince, it's when they're asleep, so Genesia would have to protect him then. Hearing they'd be sharing a bed and a blanket, she knew where this was headed. So our girl decided to cut to the chase. What happens if she hogs the blanket in her sleep? Totally thrown by her question, Kalian wondered if she was playing games. But the blanket thing? He did not see that coming. Smirking to himself, he figured his bride was way more interesting than he first thought. Confirmed the report that she's a top-tier mage, but awkward as hell in everything else. Deciding to get back on track, he remembered a royal spouse is supposed to be all about poetry, history, and philosophy. Plus, a master swordsman, a killer horseback rider, and knowing all the right manners. Basically, she's got to be on par with the imperial family, and from the moment Genesia arrives at the Winter Palace, the training starts. They're using that as an excuse to bring her there, but for our girl, this was all totally foreign. Still, Kalian thought she was the smartest mage in the whole empire, so she'd nail it all in days. Knowing he was just trying to cheer her up, Genesia decided to really give it her all. The prince figured they needed to act more natural together, so people would actually believe they were head over heels. Before long, they arrived at the Lembreche estate gates, where the butler was already waiting. To her surprise, Kalian was planning on escorting his bride all the way inside the house. As she stepped out of the carriage with him, she imagined the look on Lance's face when he found out about all this. Once they were outside, he thoughtfully offered his hand, wanting her to take it. Blushing, Genesia took his hand, and the prince respectfully led her forward. Seeing this, Lance froze in place, completely stunned, barely believing his eyes. After getting inside, she pulled him aside, hoping that after she explained everything, he'd help her pack. They didn't have much time, and the butler had something he wanted to give her. Lady Lembreche wanted that list of 105 mages selected by the Magic Tower. Artier requested more funds to thoroughly investigate 3 mages from that list. Trusting the Archer Guild, Janesia ordered them more money and told them she'd personally give them a bonus. Lance dutifully agreed, but he was still clueless about why all this was necessary. Turns out, his mistress was just being herself, and right now, she was engaged to the second prince. But she also dreams of joining the magic tower, and once this is all over, she'll dedicate her life to magic. The butler had noticed something changing in her for a while, and now it was obvious. His precious mistress had truly become a beautiful young woman. At the same time, she was fully aware that things wouldn't always be easy, and sometimes you gotta face some hardships. Sometimes you gotta solve problems yourself, and Genesia didn't want to take the easy way out anymore. That evening, the hero's carriage finally pulled up to the gates of the Winter Palace. They were greeted by His Highness's personal assistant, who was also the head butler, Rupert Bolton. After a formal welcome, he suddenly locked eyes with the esteemed guest, giving her a hard stare. This caught the heroine completely off guard. She definitely wasn't expecting that, and was totally thrown. According to the prince, Rupert would be her personal assistant from that moment forward. After ordering the butler to show her around, Callian also wanted him to start tutoring her, starting tomorrow. Janesia already suspected Rupert didn't like her, but she was sure of it when she saw the mountain of books on the table. He hoped the heroine wouldn't stay silent if any problems came up, and furthermore, he was always ready to report on her to the master. Janesia had been treated worse in the past, and it didn't scare her, but she didn't understand why he was so hostile from the get-go. Could it be that, like everyone else, he despises her just because she's a bastard? Remembering her and the prince would go their separate ways in a year, she wondered if the butler was being too much of a hard ass. Turns out, the guy didn't fully trust her yet, because not everyone knows about the attempts on His Highness's life. That's when Genesia realized it wasn't about her at all. He was just worried about Callian. Looks like a lot of people cared about His Highness. She totally got his hesitation, and honestly, she'd be doing the same thing in his shoes, but she needed the prince right now, and she genuinely wanted him to live a long and happy life. Besides, she promised to give it her all while she was there, so Janesia was going to prove herself right now. She was dead set on not leaving that office until she'd mastered all those books. After hours of grinding, her soul was practically leaving her exhausted body. While the butler was still reeling from what he saw, she was over the moon that she'd actually answered all the questions. Figuring she'd chill before the next class, she still had no clue where her bedroom was. Long story short, the prince showed up himself, scooped Sleeping Beauty into his arms, and carried her to her chamber. Waking up and seeing him, she was totally caught off guard, while Callian just figured she was wiped out. Thinking it was a dream, Genesius memorized 40 books, so yeah, she was beat. Deciding Rupert had gone way overboard with the training, our guy planned to knock some sense into him. But out of nowhere, the heroine jumps in to defend the butler, who was just super worried about his boss. The prince still had no idea how she knew about the assassination attempts, and turns out, she knew he'd hit up the magic ministry for help. Now in her bed, Genesius was seriously jealous of Callian, who had so many people looking out for him. The heroine decided that if someone treated her like that, she'd be over the freaking moon. Tucking her in and taking off her glasses, our hero noticed for the first time just how gorgeous the lady was. Over breakfast, the prince took a good look at his fiancée and decided to send Manuel to the ministry to get her a day off. He knew she'd been working late the night before and figured she could use the break. He even mentioned canceling the tailor appointment for her, which just got him a confused look. Suddenly, she remembered that Rupert had said the tailor was coming today as part of her training. Callian figured that since she was engaged to a prince, she ought to dress the part. Remembering past taunts, she blurted out that she'd never been into fashion. The dude was totally thrown by her reaction. Thinking he'd put his foot in his mouth, he immediately apologized for being a jerk, saying he didn't think she had bad taste at all. Genesia hadn't meant to say any of that out loud, but it just slipped out, and now she felt super awkward. Despite all the rumors about the dreaded second prince, Callian was actually really kind and considerate. She knew he wasn't the type to try and shame anyone on purpose. Later, they met up with two seamstresses who greeted the young lady with enthusiasm. Their boutique only makes refined and elegant handmade dresses, making it the best in the whole empire. It was a huge honor for the ladies to show her some of their work, so they led her to the gowns they'd brought. Meanwhile, Rupert brought the master some important documents that needed his immediate attention. Knowing he was busy, Janesha followed the ladies to the fitting room. The huge fitting room was crammed with gorgeous outfits, pricey shoes, and sparkling accessories. Crowding around her, the seamstresses started taking her measurements at lightning speed. Also, with her permission, they quickly removed the young lady's glasses. Seeing her eyes without glasses, The ladies thought she was like a rough diamond who desperately needed her vision corrected. Janisha was totally thrown. No one had ever complimented her like that before. After a bit, the ladies led our girl over to His Highness, apologizing for the slight delay. The lady's amethyst eyes were a total knockout with that sea green dress. That image burned itself into Kalyan's memory forever, planting the seed of a burning love in his heart. Not knowing why His Highness had gone quiet, everything was getting blurry for Janesha without her glasses. The seamstresses were the most stunned of all, because they hadn't even had to try to doll her up. Deciding she should try on another dress, Kalyan soon saw a completely new look, like an angel. After another outfit change, the seamstresses were racking their brains. How could everything look perfect on one person? After a few more dresses, our girl couldn't take it anymore and decided to call it quits. At that point, the prince decided to buy her all the dresses they brought, even the ones she hadn't tried on yet, which totally baffled the butler. Rupert was racking his brain. His Highness never cared about fancy clothes or trinkets before. Genesee didn't see the point of having so many dresses, especially since she didn't even know if they'd look good on her. Smiling back, Kalyan figured anything would look amazing on her, her face burning red. She remembered he seemed to be busy with something. Turns out, he was planning on taking care of some stuff before the upcoming tournament. It clicked. She remembered it was the most popular festival in the whole empire, held every other year. Last time, because of Kalyan's incident, Prince Jurgen took first place, and the mage Nia came in second. But the real shocker was Xavier snagging the bronze. Genesee got curious. Who decides the order of the matchups in the tournament? Plus, she'd thought the explosion was an accident back then. But what if someone deliberately tried to blow up the second prince? When she heard all the princes were doing a draft by age group, she decided to rep him. It was all to protect him, and looking at her, Kalyan was ready to trust his bride with his life. Turns out it was today, so she and the prince headed to the main palace. Walking down the hallway, she couldn't figure out why the Empire's central palace was so damn cold. According to the second prince, the freeze was magical, meant to slow down the body's decomposition. He decided they'd bounce out of there right after the draft, which Genesia was totally cool with. As it turned out, all the other princes had already arrived and were waiting in the drawing room. Stepping inside, they saw the third prince, Vikas, the fifth prince, Cezanne, and the first prince, Jurgen. Plus, fourth Prince Xavier was there too, and he immediately locked eyes with the newcomers. Holding hands and calmly approaching everyone, our girl could feel the major tension in the air. Seeing her distress, Kalyan gave his bride a knowing look, wanting to protect her at all costs. Jurgen greeted his dear brother cheerfully, also pleased to lay eyes on his bride. He figured the hero's taste in women had changed, and his current fiancée was way duller than Lady Tarek. Genesia couldn't figure out why he was staring at her, while the first prince was thinking they must be missing something. Fed up with his antics, Kalyan grabbed his brother by the head and slammed it into the floor. Jurgen seemed to have completely forgotten how much the hero hates it when someone insults his people. While the first prince was recovering from the shock, Vikas jumped up furiously, starting to yell at Kalyan. Glaring at him, the second prince ordered him to watch his damn mouth. Paralyzed by his stare, both princes went silent in fear, turning as white as a ghost. Watching them leave, Xavier laughed at those morons who had provoked Kalyan themselves. Heaving a sigh, he glanced at the second prince, wondering if Jurgen had any clue who he was messing with. This was the guy who made it possible for the heroine to ditch the Ministry of Magic without any drama. Suddenly feeling his gaze on him, the fourth prince flinched, like he'd been zapped. Meanwhile, with the first and third princes gone, the Grand Chamberlain decided to pick a card for them. But then, Genesia decided she wanted to jump in and draw for her husband too. The servant clearly wasn't thrilled about that, but he was stuck, so he smiled and invited her to the table. There were a bunch of cards on the table, and they decided the order of the ball, so she had to pick one. Reaching for the table, the heroine subtly used magic to peek at all of them. To her shock, all the cards were exactly the same. Remembering the explosion was going to happen during the ball, and realizing it was all rigged, she made up her mind which card to grab. But the second she touched the cards, she clumsily knocked them right off the table. At that moment, the Chamberlain's face twisted in horror, and he froze solid. Genesia stared at him, smirking, totally mortified by how clumsy she was. Almost all the cards flipped over, and everyone saw the numbers, followed by a super tense silence. The servant was completely lost, and our girl decided something was definitely messed up here. The Chamberlain shot her a scared look, realizing someone had totally set him up. Genesia was surprised by what he said. She hadn't even implied he'd arranged the cards like that. She knew someone had enough power to bribe even the court chamberlain, and that someone was none other than the first prince, Jurgen, the empress's heir. The heroine took a hard look, and he figured suspecting him was like suspecting the prince himself. Ripping off the eye patch, Prince Cezanne told the chamberlain to cut the crap, 'cause his magic saw right through it. The young hero's Eye of Truth was a Tier 3 artifact, and it could sniff out any lie. Actually, not really, and the servant just hoped the kid would quit screwing around. Knowing Cezanne was just messing with a popular toy, Janisha cooked up a sneaky plan. Showing mad respect for the sacred relic, she hoped His Highness would let her take it for a spin. Slapping the eye patch on, she faked like she could suddenly see everything, and that it was a legit legendary artifact. Totally winging it, she claimed she saw a massive shield behind the chamberlain, decorated with petals. Knowing that kind of shield was on Prince Jurgen's crest, everyone figured he'd rigged the game. Not understanding how she found all this out, the servant started to wonder if the toy actually worked. Dropping to his knees before the lady, the chamberlain sincerely hoped they wouldn't rat him out to His Majesty. Drawing his sword, the second prince decided his fiancée needed to head back to the Winter Palace. Deciding to leave the servant to her fiancé, the heroine quickly excused herself from the drawing room. Later, she went to the Winter Palace greenhouse to clear her head and think things through. It all seemed too easy, but the swapped cards would give Jurgen an advantage, though he gains nothing from an explosion. Because of that, Genesia had a feeling she was missing something important. Suddenly appearing before her, Manuel greeted the heroine with a cheerful hello. He suspected she'd want to jump right back into work, so he decided to warn her that the Ministry of Magic was in chaos. Genesia immediately thought Lisbel had messed something up again, but it was something else entirely. What's more, the girl immediately transferred to another department after that incident. The hero was much more worried about the reporters Lady Tarek had sicked on the Ministry of Magic. She's Prince Kalyan's ex-fiancée, and looks like she's holding a grudge. The main character knew the woman wasn't entirely wrong, but it still ticked her off. Lady Tarek's aiming to bury the second prince's reputation before the inauguration even happens. If Janisha goes back to work, every reporter will jump on her, and the rumors will fly. Plus, she's definitely gonna run into Kalyan's ex at the inauguration. After thanking Manuel for the info, she decided to get seriously prepared for this. She also found out that, luckily, Cedric was actually in a pretty good mood. Janisha had figured he'd be bummed about Lisbel switching departments. She'd thought the court mage had some hidden feelings for the lady, but maybe not. Knowing it'd be kind of out of left field, the hero wanted to ask about something else regarding the inauguration. Manuel, blushing like crazy, was about to ask the heroine for a dance. He knew the second prince would snag her for the first dance, but after all that, he hoped she'd still have the energy to dance with him. Figuring he had no one else to ask, Janesia totally understood, since she never got to dance with anyone at her own prom. Back then, Lisbel gave her this fake sympathy, while drowning in dance requests herself. But according to that fake friend, Janesia had nothing to worry about, because she was Xavier's fiancée after all. Not wanting him to suffer the same fate, the heroine happily accepted his invitation. What's more, she was determined to perfect her dancing skills. Turns out dancing was way harder in practice than in theory, and Janesia regretted not hitting up more events. Practicing that very evening, she accidentally twisted her ankle and started to fall. A split second later, she was in Kalyan's arms, who seemed to appear out of nowhere. Figuring she was rushing things, the hero grabbed her waist and started dancing with her. Using his tips, the heroine suddenly realized she was actually getting the hang of it. She was terrified of embarrassing the second prince at the ceremony with her clunky moves. In exchange for keeping quiet about the card switch, the chamberlain convinced the emperor to paint new ones. On top of that, Jurgen asked his mother to send Genesia a personal gift. What that means is, if anyone dares to make fun of the heroine at the ceremony, they're basically insulting the empress. Kalyan did everything he could to make sure his bride just enjoyed the celebration. The day before the big event, she magically healed her eyesight, and then those seamstresses showed up. This time, Genesia wanted them to do her makeup, so she was unrecognizable. Tonight was the ball, right before the tournament. Xavier was stoked that Kalyan exposed Jurgen's cheating, 'cause for keeping quiet, the first prince promised each of them a favor. Suddenly, he spots the second prince and Janesia walking into the banquet hall. He and everyone else were blown away by how incredibly regal the girl looked. Empress Theodora was also impressed with her elegance and complimented the heroine on her appearance. Turning her gaze to His Majesty, Janesia flinched, totally freaked out. The emperor didn't have magic, but he looked way younger than he should and radiated this creepy aura. Turning her to face him, Kalyan wanted her to chill and lean on him for support. They started dancing, and soon the heroine realized her heels were way too high. He was hoping she'd sit down after the dance, but she already had a dance lined up with Manuel. So, he put her feet on top of his and figured she could just relax completely and pretend to dance. They were way too close now, and Genesia was freaking out that Callian could hear her heart pounding. Watching them dance, the guests were all thinking this couple should just head straight to the altar. Meanwhile, Lisbel was off to the side, grinding her teeth, totally jealous. Her friends Meg and Selena were just as shocked by her nerve and decided to help her out. The ladies planned to take care of the heroine when she went to the restroom, while Lisbel could try to get Callian's attention. People used to think the Emperor forced the second prince and the sorceress to date, but looks like those rumors were BS. Suddenly, the heroine overheard the ladies whispering that she was just using Callian, just like Xavier. Jumping on the bandwagon, the other ladies decided Genesia was a heartbreaker back in the academy, and the second prince probably forced himself on her. When she went over to confront them, she suddenly spotted Selena in the middle of the crowd. Back in her past life, she, Meg, and Lisbel went all out bullying the heroine at the academy. No way was Janesha gonna let them trash-talk Callian right now. First, she needed to make it crystal clear that Prince Xavier IV held zero interest for her. Besides, she's totally in love with the second prince, who actually proposed to her. Selena's spreading lies about them is an insult to both her and Callian. So from now on, she needs to watch her step. Janesha was expecting some kind of response, but the lady just turned around and walked away. Hearing she did all that for him, our main dude was blown away by how unpredictable she is. He glanced at Xavier and saw nothing but bitter hatred and jealousy burning in his eyes. Knowing people still bought into the fourth prince and her romance, Callian decided to return the favor and gently kissed her hair. Doing her best to calm her racing heart, Janesha figured she needed a trip to the ladies' room. No sooner did she walk in than Meg and Selena greeted her with way too much enthusiasm. Back in the academy, last life, they found out from Lisbel that this girl was talking smack behind their backs. Janesha never did anything, but these ladies just didn't believe her and kept piling on the abuse. And now these broads actually think she might be worthy to join their fancy noblewomen's club. Well, if that's the case, our girl wants a full-on apology for all the crap they pulled on her back then. Meg, totally losing it, couldn't believe this creature who stole Lisbel's guy was trying to order them around. Before this, they heard from Lady Kendall that Janesha was just faking being Xavier's fiancé and straight up stole him from her friend. So, they're only here to stall our heroine while Lisbel's out hunting down the second prince. The heroine remembered that Lady Kendall always craved what she had and would stop at nothing to get it. But this time, Janesha decided she ain't letting her get what she wants. She slams her hand across the table, sending bottles flying and wine splashing all over the place. Magic items were banned at the event, which meant Meg and Selena were totally defenseless. Conjuring up a massive pillar of flame and aiming it at the spilled liquor, she wanted those ladies to clear the hell out of her way. Selena was freaking out, not understanding what happened to the loser they used to know. Janesha thought they were similar in that Lisbel had played them all for fools. But the hero wasn't falling for it anymore, while Meg and Selena were still her puppets. Not wanting to just sit back, she blasted a stream of fire at the ladies, but then the fire just fizzled out, leaving the girls completely stunned. Janesha could have easily taken them down with magic, but she didn't want to sink to their level. As she left, she just wanted to clarify that she'd never talked smack about them behind their backs. Meanwhile, Manuel leaned against a tree in the garden, totally rattled by what he'd seen at the banquet. Rupert walked up to him, wanting to confirm that His Highness was in the garden, and Lady Lambreche was in the ladies' room. He knew the real reason the hero was down in the dumps was because of the heroine. But Manuel serves the second prince, and he shouldn't be wanting what belongs to his master. The hero wasn't having any of that, though. Considering Janesha didn't even like Callian. Just then, the heroine suddenly bolted out into the garden, catching the guys completely off guard. When she told them the second prince was in danger, they all took off together to find him. Meanwhile, Callian met with his uncle Richard and turned down his offer. The count wanted to put His Highness on the throne, but the second prince just wanted to wipe out the royal family once and for all. He also realized his uncle just wanted to use him for his own family's sake. Pretending he actually wanted to help, Richard reminded him that His Highness's mother was from their family. Out of nowhere, Lisbel steps out from behind a tree, her feet and the hem of her dress covered in mud. After politely greeting the gentleman, Lady Kendall swears she wasn't trying to eavesdrop on their conversation. This girl was totally different, even her looks, from the Lisbel that Richard remembered, and he needed to know what she'd heard. Truth is, she hadn't heard a thing, but the lady decided to play it like she had. She would keep her mouth shut, but only if Kalyan agreed to see her every now and then. But the hero just gave her this look, pure disgust, which totally threw her for a loop. She let out a nervous laugh, then clarified that she just wanted to hear more about her best friend. They'd had a falling out recently, and Lisbel was hoping His Highness could help them patch things up. Meanwhile, the heroes were rushing to see the second prince, and Genesia accidentally hurt her leg. Suddenly, she spotted Kalyan, looking pissed, with Lady Kendall tagging along behind him. Lisbel caught the heroine's eye and immediately wrote Meg and Selena off as useless airheads. She instantly started acting like she'd bumped into the second prince by chance, but Genesia wasn't buying it. Realizing things were spiraling, the lady decided to squeeze out a tear, hoping everyone would pity her and blame the heroine like always. But to her surprise, Kalyan went straight to his fiancé and looked at her ankle with concern. Rupert and Manuel got orders to take them back to the palace, while Lisbel was freaking out, wondering why nobody was even looking at her. Out of nowhere, the second prince swept Genesia up in his arms and headed for the carriage. He was trying to show Lady Kendall exactly how head over heels they were for each other. Plain and simple. Seeing the girl's rage, the heroine just decided she wasn't worth their time. And right then, being held by the prince like that, she was blushing like crazy. The next day, Genesia was still mentally replaying everything that went down yesterday. What freaked her out the most was Kalyan, and how it felt like he was putting way more into this relationship than she was. Rupert, sitting across from her, clarified that the second prince wouldn't compete until the end of the tournament, so she could chill at the palace for now. Meanwhile, Xavier was absolutely furious about the draw and couldn't wrap his head around how his dad let this happen. Before all that, the Emperor himself handed him a magic amulet that activates attack magic and boosts the user's power. Still, the fourth prince never expected to get stuck in the same round as Kalyan during the drawing. His right-hand man, Jade Wiseman, figured his lord should save his strength for the tournament, since he was His Majesty's favorite. At the same time, the aide was shocked at how immature and spoiled Xavier was acting. A little later, Genesia decided to check out the tournament arena. Seeing in the brochure that the second and fourth princes were in the same round, she was totally floored. Back in her past life, when the explosion happened, they were in the same group too, and she couldn't figure out how it could happen again. That was a massive explosion, and setting something like that up requires a complex magic rune and a powerful magic source. Suddenly, she heard a familiar voice behind her, offering a young lady a helping hand. It turned out to be Jade Wiseman, who wasn't just Xavier's right-hand man, but also a self-proclaimed baron and con artist. Hearing that Genesia wanted to check out the arena, he volunteered to give her a tour and help her sneak into the stadium. As soon as they stepped into the arena, the girl started carefully examining the entire surroundings, which puzzled him. Suddenly, she discovered magic destruction stones under the slabs, enough for an explosion. But they still needed to find the magic rune. The knights on guard couldn't stand such insolence and demanded they stop touching everything. Turns out, they were only let in because of Jade's connections, but they could be arrested for property damage. Stepping outside, they heard furious shouts from the arena fighters, who couldn't understand how they could lose to a kid. The boy responded by saying they were all just losers, which made the guys even angrier. Lord Wiseman figured he'd just ignore it, but the heroine couldn't let it slide. Marching right up to those punks, she decided to give them a piece of her mind, make them feel bad. The dudes didn't want any trouble with a noble lady and bolted, and then Genesia learned the kid's name was Nia Nocturne. Taking a good look at him, it hit her. This was the same guy who took second place at the tournament in her past life. Figuring he was probably freaked out by those bullies, the heroine decided to walk him home. Deciding to forgive her as thanks for saving him, Nia was quick to point out that he's a dragon and centuries older than her. After buying him some ice cream, she found out the hero was on the hunt for his dolls. The elders of the Magic Tower promised to help him, but when they broke their oath, Nia cut ties with them. The heroine couldn't believe they were using dragons like that for their own gain. She was the first person to help him out without wanting anything back, and that's why the dragon decided to open up to her. On top of that, Nia could see magic, and just one look at Genesia told him she was a good and seriously powerful wizard. Surprised by this ability, she hoped the dragon could help her find the rune in the arena. After getting his okay, she took him to the Winter Palace, hoping they'd let Nia stay there. Rupert's brother, who just lost to this kid in a fight, was floored by the whole situation. But the hero himself was stoked the girl showed up, cause His Highness was dying to show off his skills for her. The second prince was seriously confused about how she managed to befriend this guy. Letting out a heavy sigh, he figured she'd forgotten about the tournament because she was having fun. Thinking he was bummed because she wasn't holding up her end of the deal, Genesia decided to pay closer attention from now on. Totally flustered by what she said, the hero didn't mean any of that at all. All of a sudden, the dragon took a liking to the red-eyed prince, who also happened to be dying. Nia caught a glimpse of something in his heart, and knew no normal person could live like that. Kalyan shot to his feet, drawing his sword, wondering how this kid dared to say that stuff. But then he saw the heroine's look, and sheathed his blade, deciding they should talk this through. He figured out that Genesia saw a lot of herself in the boy. She was just stoked to chat magic with someone who loved it as much as she did. Plus, for the first time, she felt like she had a real friend. So, the second prince ordered a room prepped for him, and decided that if Nia screwed up, she'd be the one paying for it. Genesius was totally stoked about what she heard, thanking Kalyan and thinking he was a real sweetheart. The next day, alone with the dragon, she hoped he could help her find the explosion activator. Also, the heroine was curious about what that thing in the second prince's heart was that they talked about yesterday. Turns out, this was a stone made by the dragon Joan, and it had the power to heal. According to Nia, Kalyan died once, but this thing brought him back to life. But dragons usually don't share their creations, so the hero figured humans stole the stone. The dolls he was looking for were made by his mom, and they were stolen too. Back then, he didn't know much about people, so he trusted the Magic Tower elders. But they screwed him over. Now, Genesia realized that in her past life, Jurgen used Nia to win the tournament too. So this time, she decided to offer him protection and guarantee he'd get his dolls back. Seeing that the heroine was different from other humans, the dragon agreed to her offer. After that, they headed to the stadium where the tournament was already in full swing. The VIP room was heavily guarded, and according to the guards, only royalty could get in. Genesis was positive that being the second prince's fiancé gave her the right to enter. The guards at the gate didn't buy it. But luckily, Jade suddenly came out of the doors. Xavier's aide confirmed it for the guards, hoping he'd been of some help to the heroine. His hair and aura reminded the heroine of Lisbel, and she was not a fan. Nia bolted ahead, hoping to find the magic artifact she needed, ASAP. Bursting into the room and stopping in front of the Emperor, the dragon pinched his nose at the awful stench. Following right behind her, Genesius respectfully greeted the Empire's son. Giving her an indifferent glance, His Majesty turned away and went back to watching the tournament. The girl was totally stunned that he looked even younger than during their previous encounter. Meanwhile, Nia could no longer fight back the urge to puke his guts out. Magic was unique and diverse, just like people's personalities. The dragon sensed the heroine's magic, which was warm, like the sun. The Emperor had all sorts of rotten magic festering inside him, and Nia felt sick from the stench. Suddenly, they announced the start of the stage that Kalyan was supposed to compete in. The hero scanned the whole stadium and saw that a lot of participants had stuff that could cause an explosion. There weren't many people who could make a bunch of magical artifacts at once, so the second prince was definitely the target of the blast. The dragon decided to ask, does she actually like that red-eyed guy? Thinking he meant love in general, she figured that she cared about all her friends, him included. Nia noticed she was searching every corner for a magic item for the prince. Was he really worth it? The heroine wanted to explain that they were bound by contract, but why couldn't she get the words out? Truth is, she wanted to stick with Kalyan as long as possible, even after the contract was up. He was the kindest dude she knew, and he genuinely cared about her. The hero didn't exactly impress the dragon, but since Genesia valued him so much, he agreed to help out. Touching the heroine's head with her finger, Nia gave her the ability to see the world through dragon's eyes and use their magic. Meanwhile, thanks to the stone he got, Xavier easily crushed the prelims. But the thing had a limited number of uses, and the hero decided to save it for later. Spotting Janesha on one of the balconies, he got hyped, thinking she came to watch him. Following her gaze, he realized with horror that she was staring at Kalyan. The second prince didn't get why she was there, since he wasn't due to fight for ages. Out of nowhere, the fourth prince challenged him right then and there, saying if he won, he'd take the heroine for himself. Kalyan lost it. He was furious. Genesia wasn't some prize to be won, so, deciding to teach him some respect for women, he accepted Xavier's challenge. The heroine stared in horror at the fourth prince's pendant, which was glowing brighter, pumping him full of power. Xavier caught her looking and grinned, determined to get Genesia back and do the king's bidding. He launched a fierce attack on the second prince, but Kalyan just calmly dodged it. Noticing how he kept clutching the pendant, Kalyan realized his opponent was cheating. The heroine heard from Nia that this very pendant would cause the magic stones to explode, but she knew it was a gift from the king himself. crafted by the mages in the tower. Meanwhile, tired of trying to find an opening, Kalian decided to end this. The fourth prince was running on fumes and knew he was about to lose the fight. So, naturally, he had to ask if the hero noticed who the heroine was staring at the whole time. Xavier figured she was still hung up on him and just using the second prince to make him jealous. Plus, he remembered that Kalian wouldn't know love if it hit him, since he offed his own mom. In that instant, the hero's sword sliced across him, tearing through his face and the stone behind him. Shaking from pain and fear, the fourth prince hoped his stepbrother wouldn't off him in front of everyone. Looking at Genesis, Kalian knew they had a contract, and Xavier's words shouldn't sting, but inside, he was still burning. Suddenly, magic circles popped up everywhere, and the heroine jumped off the balcony straight toward the second prince. Catching her, he was like, "Wait, when did I even start having feelings for her?" Right after that, a massive explosion rocked the place. The heroine used dragon magic and threw up barriers around them, keeping them safe. The earth sucked up all the magic from Xavier's stone, and the blast was even bigger than we thought. Looking sadly at Genesia, Kalian figured she shouldn't risk her life like that just because of the contract. Smiling back, she would have protected him even without the damn thing. A week went by, and on the Emperor's orders, they stopped looking for the culprit and swept the whole thing under the rug. Besides, ever since then, the heroes have been acting all awkward around each other. Meanwhile, Rupert ran into Nia and decided to give him a job. He handed him the cash from His Highness, and the dragon was supposed to take Genesia out for a walk. Before long, they were smack dab in the middle of a bustling market. Spotting a huge black tent, Nia decided to check it out. Turns out, the place belonged to a witch who was slinging her potions. Before this, the only time she'd heard about stuff like this was in books, so she thought it was a real find. When she found out one of the bottles was a love potion, she knew she had to buy it. Another customer was trying to do the same thing, but Genesia snagged it first. Suddenly, the stranger recognized her. Turns out, it was Lady Beloise Tarek, Kalian's ex-fiancée. Later, sitting in a cafe, the three of them, she remembered waking up one morning and finding out she was engaged to the second prince. Her father sold her off to win the Empress's trust, so she went straight to His Highness with a deal. She handed over her father's secret book, and Lady Tarek got protection and the chance to break off the engagement. She'd been hiding at Rupert's place this whole time, and today she was about to leave Giron when she ran into them. And since things had shaken out this way, she hoped Genesia wouldn't refuse to give her the love potion. The heroine only grabbed it out of curiosity, not to use it on Kalian, so she happily agreed. But then Beloise just up and changed her mind, figuring it'd be way more romantic to win a guy over than just get him drunk. After that, she bailed, and the heroes headed back to the Winter Palace. Catching her at the entrance, the second prince was hoping Genesee could spare him a sec. He remembered Xavier's words about how she still had feelings for him. His Highness knew the fourth prince was just trying to get under his skin, but he still caught the way the heroine looked at him. Right now, he wanted to apologize for those things he said about the contract, back when he was all worked up. Genesee remembered Beloise saying she saw her rush to the prince in the arena, and that's the kind of thing you only do if you're in love. Smiling, she happily accepted his apology, thanking him for the ring he'd given her. Then, out of nowhere, the Emperor's servant showed up, inviting Lady Lembreche to an audience with His Majesty. As she stood before the throne room doors, she felt a terrifying, unfamiliar magic and a bone-chilling cold. When he saw her, the Emperor wanted to know exactly what kind of magic she'd pulled off in the arena. But His Majesty knew from the minister that a person just couldn't naturally generate that much magic. Genesia kept stubbornly insisting it was just a standard defensive spell. And as for anything weird, magic's practically unexplainable anyway, so yeah, just one of those things. After getting her to sit on the couch, the Emperor suddenly decided he liked her. He knew not everyone could do what she did, and he wondered if she could create a rune to turn back time. If she could, she'd become His Majesty's personal magic advisor. The Emperor knew tons of people would kill to work for him, but he didn't see that kind of ambition in Lady Lembreche's eyes. He didn't see an issue, since her relationship with Kalian was just a contract anyway. Besides, the monarch knew the second prince didn't have long to live, so he figured she should dump him. After hearing that, and thinking back on everything, she was convinced the Emperor was behind it all. Just then, guards started yelling in the hallway, and Kalian burst into the throne room. Seeing that, His Majesty ordered the execution of every soldier guarding the entrance. The Emperor wanted the hero to know his place, because the lives of everyone around him depended on his actions. The second prince decided Genesia really was important to him, and besides, She was the only one who could send His Majesty back in time. His father was completely shocked and figured his son was just trying to show he wanted to be the heir. Laughing to himself, the emperor had previously thought he rushed to save the lady because he actually loved her. Finding out she was just Kalyan's business partner, the monarch let them both go and even decided to spare the guards. The second prince was super worried, but she knew he was lying to protect her. The hero did want to seize the throne and overthrow the current monarchy, but he wasn't planning on using Ganesha to do it. He'd had his suspicions for a while, but after the explosion, Kalyan knew it was the emperor who'd been trying to off him the whole time. Now, the empress is going to find out about his plan to take the throne, and the hunt will be on for him and his crew. Rupert, Ash, Manuel, Aza, and all His Highness's knights knew what they were getting into, but the heroine was different. Kalyan didn't want her becoming a target because of their fake relationship, but Genesis was determined to go all the way and decided he should be happy. Not everyone gets the chance to snag a talented mage like her. Around this time, Xavier started coming to after getting healed. Jade was glad he at least survived, but the fourth prince thought his life was worthless now that his face was messed up. During the duel, he watched in horror as Kalyan suddenly got distracted by the heroine. Remembering that moment, he bolted, saving his own hide. When the explosion went off, he was lucky enough to be within range of Genesis' barriers. The healer patched him up, but sadly, that massive scar across half his face is there to stay. Lord Wiseman flashed back to the Emperor, whipping him raw for screwing up the plan. Before that, His Majesty met with Kalyan and the heroine, but she clammed up about the source of her magic. The Emperor knew the second prince had hated his guts since childhood, and figured he wanted a time rewind too. Now he needed Ganesha, and if the magic minister's right, she's tight with Lisbel Kendall. Remembering his last run-in with the then-young blonde lady, Lord Wiseman froze solid. She came from a family of mages who used to live in Avalentis, which is where Jade's from too. So the Emperor decided to dump this job on him, but the Lord would do anything to avoid meeting anyone from the Kendall family. They were the most powerful family around, and their trademark was their golden hair. Years ago, Jade and his family were their slaves. Social status in the Empire? Huge deal. Slaves were treated like dirt. One day, the kid brought food home and saw his mom was missing a leg. He turned to his little sister Ruby and knew deep down it was probably her fault. Turns out, Mom promised to give her anything, and Ruby wanted one of Lady Lisbel's ribbons. Ruby figured her mom was just too dumb and got caught, and that's why she lost her leg. Jade bolted right after that, hoping he'd never run into the Kendalls again. Then this massive fire broke out. Lisbel was the only one who made it. Mom and Ruby were probably toast. Meanwhile, Lady Kendall was losing it, because everyone was fawning over that ungrateful brat. Lisbel decided she was the one who deserved to be in the spotlight, period. Suddenly, she got a visitor from the Ministry of Magic. Thinking it was Janisha coming to beg for forgiveness, the girl rushed to the door. Throwing it open with hope, she was shocked to see Lord Windsor standing there. Back on the couch, Lady Kendall wanted to know what he needed. Handing her the bouquet, the professor felt awkward. This was his first relationship after all. Not understanding what he was talking about, Lisbel remembered she needed a letter of recommendation from him. Hearing everyone judging her, she cried her eyes out to the Lord and hoped for his sympathy. She figured if he helped her transfer, maybe they could get to know each other better. And now, the hero had come to her, ready to make any dream a reality. Then, the girl remembered the secret Kesher auction, where an invitation costs 20 million gold coins. She decided that if the Lord loved her, they'd go together and he'd buy her a necklace. Later on, Rupert handed Genesius a package from her butler. It was a list of 105 wizards from the Magic Tower, and she wanted to track down their boss. The Arthur Guild couldn't ID him, so she decided to ask Naya for help. According to the dragon, the mage's leader was Kaon Singrir, who was sly as a fox. Genesius remembered that in her past life, he was also called the con man of the magic mine. Tons of people invested in his project, and he used their money to buy everything at the Kesher auction. Wanting to meet him, she found out that the Manuel family was tight with the auction organizers. After his people told him her intentions, the Emperor couldn't figure out why she even needed info about the Magic Tower. When he learned she was planning to move there after her contract ended, he realized Genesius just wanted a peaceful life. He also got intel that the White Knights could be found on the streets of Relson, the Magic Academy, and the secret Kesher auction. Knowing the heroine would be there, the second prince decided to head over himself. Leaving his office, Lady Ash learned from Rupert that His Highness has feelings for Lady Lembreche. The hero thought this was a problem, 'cause she'd definitely be trouble and talk Kaelin out of revenge. But the lady thought it was a good thing, actually, because the prince will do anything to achieve his goals and protect her. Ash felt there was something special about her, something that could melt anyone's heart. Hearing their conversation, Manuel was shocked that Kaelin was in love with the heroine. A week later, he went to the auction with her. Janicia had no idea his family had connections like that. The hero got his magic from his mother, while his father's family has always been powerful in art and fashion. Thanks to their influence in society, the head of the auction will welcome the Sieta family with open arms. The heroine realized how little she knew about Manuel, but according to him, they just barely bumped into each other at the academy. But as far as Janesha remembered, they never talked. She just watched him from afar. Then the guy decided to ask if she remembered the local mutt, Moku. She remembered her immediately and found out that he'd taken the dog in. What's more, thanks to that dog, they met face to face for the first time. Back then, he saw her sitting with the dog in the spot where he hid from everyone. After sharing some food with her, Manuel learned that she was already a senior. Back then, everyone compared him to an older brother, and he just wanted to vanish. Stroking the dog, Janisha decided that even though her life was total hell, she never thought about ending it. Refusing to give up, she decided she needed to love herself first. Her words hit him hard, and he finally felt ready to talk to his family and clear the air. They got to the auction pretty quick, but the guy at the door wanted to see their invites. Once he had them and realized they were VIPs, he started leading them down the hall. They walked for a while, and damn, the estate was way bigger than it looked from the outside. When he pulled out the invites earlier, she spotted a weird envelope he had, black and gold. It was a family envelope, and she got this strange feeling like she'd seen it before somewhere. Manuel remembered sending her a graduation invite in an envelope like that, but she never showed. But Janesha was sure, like 100% sure, she never got any letter at all. Beating himself up for not handing it to her in person, he figured he totally ruined her graduation. Meanwhile, they finally arrived at Kesher's super-secret auction. Rocking that mask, prom was the last thing on her mind. She just needed to know what happened to that letter. Inside the hall, there were only 4 people besides the host. She rushed to grab a seat. The auction head was really hoping everyone would find what they were looking for. First up, a vase made from a magic creature's tusk, starting bid at 100 grand in gold. One by one, the bidders started raising their paddles and throwing out numbers. Janicia wasn't trying to buy anything. She just needed someone to know she was here. Last item, a necklace with the only black diamond in the world, starting bid at 2 million gold. Out of nowhere, one of the bidders who hadn't said a word yet jumped in with 3 million. She realized that was the head of the magic tower, and that he was just trying to launder money. Manuel figured she could bid whatever she wanted. His Highness had dropped a ridiculous amount of cash on this auction. Kalian owns the biggest magic stone mine in Giron, so yeah, the dude's loaded. Janicia finally gets why he's so generous, but the hero just thinks she's special. Hearing the bids go up, she throws down 5 million, hoping that'll do it. The head mage starts driving up the price, and playing chicken with him, she doesn't even notice the bid hits 8 million. Out of nowhere, Lisbel slams down 20 million, and the lord next to her practically jumps out of his skin. They don't have that kind of cash, but she knows you can also pay with your organs at this auction. Since the professor's got 2 eyes and 2 kidneys, he could totally sell them for her. Taking off her mask, Janicia orders her to stop using Lord Windsor and pay up out of her own pocket. Lady Kendall's totally floored, wondering how the hell she even got here. Seeing Lord Sieta next to her, she figures the heroine must have forced him to come with her. Lisbel rushed to the door, itching to tell the second prince that Genasiah was sneaking around with someone else behind his back. But our girl decided she shouldn't judge everyone else by her own standards, and the lord shouldn't let himself get played. Lady Kendall uses people, then just tosses them aside when they're no longer useful. Lisbel fired back, yelling at her and making fun of how Genasiah used to follow her around like a lost puppy. She also remembered someone had slipped a letter into our girl's locker, inviting her to prom. Lady Kendall always thought our girl's stuff was her stuff, so she swiped the letter and read it. Hearing her mock its ridiculous content, Manuel realized with horror that it was his prom invitation she was talking about. Assuming some loser had sent it, Lisbel figured Genasiah should be thanking her. Instead, our girl clocked her right across the face. Stunned again, Lady Kendall realized that no one had ever dared to lay a hand on her before. Furious, she went to strike back, but the heroine calmly caught and stopped her hand. Her dear friend wrote that letter, and Genasiah wanted Lisbel to stop belittling other people's efforts. Yanking her hand free, looking annoyed, the lady decided she'd spill the beans about their secret romance later. Manuel never thought his feelings for the heroine would screw his highness over so badly. Genesia figured people weren't dumb enough anymore to just blindly believe her made-up crap. Lisbel was totally thrown, not understanding when she had changed so much. With a crazy smirk, she decided people never change and always fall for rumors. Lady Kendall was sure that if she could fool Xavier, she could do the same thing to Kalian. But Genesia had already fallen for the second prince and trusted him completely. Suddenly, the head mage cut into their conversation, saying the auction was already over. Turns out, the dude in the black cloak bought the necklace for 200 million. Lisbel instantly started screaming at Lord Windsor, blaming him for the whole thing. Hearing her insults, Kalian finally took off his mask and hood, thinking she'd fit right in with a bunch of sailors. While everyone was still in shock, he walked up to the heroine and handed her the trophy he'd bought. It was the least he could do to thank her for believing in him. Glancing at Manuel, Lady Kendall saw her chance and accused Genesia of betraying his highness. The second prince was curious what she'd cooked up this time, 'cause he already knew she was full of it back in the garden. Offended by his sharp tone, she spun around and headed for the exit. Kalian was wondering who the hell gave her permission to leave. But Lisbel knew it was just a spat between her and the heroine, and he wouldn't do anything to her for it. Selling organs, though? That's a whole different level, and if the royal mage is mixed up in that, it's gonna be a PR nightmare for the whole damn family. The prince, realizing how messed up this was, called in the knights and ordered them to arrest Lady Kendall and anyone else involved. She spun around, totally furious, and started demanding help from Lord Windsor, blaming his greed for everything. The professor didn't react at all, so Lisbel turned to Genesia, hoping her friend would back her up. But the heroine figured the girl needed to pay for what she'd done a long time ago. Gritting her teeth, Lady swore she'd get her revenge one day for this betrayal. After she left, Kalian decided it was too dangerous there and ordered the heroine to get out. He wanted to look around himself and see if he could find a secret underground passage. Deciding to help him out, she spotted a magic orb off to the side. She poured her magic into it, and suddenly, Genesia saw a doorway start to open up in the wall. Right after that was a passage downwards, reeking of magic, terrible but familiar. Heading down, the heroes found a room littered with corpses, magic stones sticking out of them. That meant the Emperor's power source was people. Just how many had he killed? Kalian wanted to get the heroine out of there, but she needed to figure things out. Later, as the sun came up, Genesia waited for the second prince to return to the Winter Palace. He finally got back that night, bringing news about the auction. Tons of people were involved in the experiments. He even had to put the Ministry of Magic on his suspect list. Genesia was sure the Emperor needed mages who could create magic stones to absorb energy. Everyone's born with a spark of magic, but you gotta awaken it to become a full-blown mage. Not many can do it on their own. Usually, you need help from your parents or a mentor. That's why most mages were nobles. They had the resources for awakening and family knowledge. Almost nobody can cast spells on their own. But with magic stones, even a regular Joe can set off an explosion. Most of those stones are mined, but you can also get them from people's bodies. Thing is, that last method's perfect for anyone wanting to use magic illegally and stay under the radar. Genesia suspected the Emperor, but she couldn't figure out why he'd do it. Kalian knew his father's real desire was to achieve eternal life. The investigation revealed the Minister of Magic found a wizard's diary detailing a way to live forever. Knowing it sounded crazy, the heroine wondered if she should tell Kalian about her time travel. The people she used to trust betrayed her, but even so, Genesia decided to give him a shot. Looking him right in the eye, the heroine confessed she could turn back time. But you can't get eternal life going down that road. She started racking her brain, trying to explain it simply to someone who can't even cast a spell. But the second prince didn't need explanations. He just trusted her. Only if she was okay with it, he wanted to know why. She even needed to time travel in the first place. So Genesia decided to spill the whole story about Xavier and Lisbel's betrayal and how they almost burned her at the stake. Before this, Kalian thought she came to him just because she didn't want to marry the fourth prince. But now he couldn't wrap his head around how Xavier even dared to treat her like that. The heroine came back to get revenge, but when she saw the guards dragging Lady Kendall away, all she felt was sorrow. Taking her hand, the hero decided Genesia had a kind heart, one that was easily wounded. And what he liked most about her was that she stayed good, no matter what. Time passed, and the Emperor summoned the second prince to the war room in the royal palace. His Majesty knew he just went to get his fiancée a gift and happened to witness a crime. But there was no way he was buying into that bull. Just then, Callian remembered when he and the heroine found that secret door in the dungeon, the one that was sealed shut. Even back then, he figured it was a hidden passage for the White Knights. They were the Emperor's own secret guard, lurking in the shadows and wiping out anything in their path. Genesis couldn't break the seal on the door, and thought maybe Nia could do a better job. The hero didn't see how a kid could help, and she had to come clean. He was actually a dragon. So now, knowing it was too soon to go against His Majesty, the second prince decided to back off for now. He remembered everyone involved in the auction had been arrested, but they hadn't been interrogated yet. Callian decided to sit out the investigation, but he wanted a favor in return. Trying to get on the dragon's good side, he wanted the prize that was meant for the tournament winner. The Emperor was completely baffled. He thought Callian was after the White Knights and those artificial magic stones. But did he really come to the auction just to buy that little brat a diamond? No time to dwell on it now, though. The Emperor desperately needed those rejuvenation stones. Meanwhile, Genesia was waiting for her fiancé in the inner royal garden. Suddenly, she overheard some guys talking about His Highness's cousin, Uren. Approaching Lady Lembresh, Uren Schutiner figured that gossiping behind someone's back is for the insecure. Back when she was getting lessons on becoming the second prince's bride, she learned that His Highness was related to the Schutiners through his mother's side. Lord Richard Schutiner was the current Duke Palatine, and Uren was his son, and a cripple. Right then, Genesia was happy to run into the prince's cousin. No sooner did they think of him than they saw Callian heading their way. Giving a genuine smile, Uren hoped His Highness was doing well. The second prince's face immediately darkened as he scrutinized his cousin. Looking at his bum leg, he realized the hero never really recovered. Deciding he'd visit the Duke later, Callian started to leave, calling Genesia to follow. Rushing after him, she quickly told Uren they'd catch up later. Meanwhile, Jade arrived at the palace dungeon to talk to Lady Kendall on the Emperor's orders. Resigned to the inevitable, he started down, knowing she'd be executed soon anyway. Reaching the right floor, he heard Lisbel's annoyed voice, complaining about how dare they feed her such garbage. The hero was totally thrown off seeing her pink hair, couldn't believe his eyes. She glanced at him and instantly recognized Jade, her dear brother. Shaking from shock and confusion, he couldn't figure out what Ruby was doing here. She snapped at him to shut his trap, that she was now Lisbel Kendall, the sole survivor of the great Avalentis wizard family. She couldn't actually cast spells, but she was using them thanks to a borrowed family relic. Her brother started to despise her for the deception, but Ruby reminded him how he ditched her and Mom and ran off. And now she wondered if he wanted to tell his new buddies who he really was. In exchange for her silence, she wanted Jade to get her out of there. If he didn't, she'd spill the beans about his past before she died. 'Cause what they do to slaves who pretend to be nobles is way worse than death. Word spread like wildfire. Callian locked up every single crook from that auction. Knowing the Emperor pardoned some mages, a lot of people figured it was because they were nobles. Meanwhile, Ruby made it to the second prince's estate safe and sound. She told the guards at the entrance she was Lisbel Kendall, Lady Lembresh's best friend. Meeting up in the guest room, the heroine wanted to know why she even bothered showing up. Looking all bummed out, Lady Kendall wanted to apologize for how she acted at the auction. But at the same time, she felt like she had no choice. Genesia started it all. They used to be inseparable, but then the heroine got obsessed. First with Xavier, then Manuel, and now Callian too. She turned her back on their friendship, and Lisbel got so messed up, she started lashing out. Genesia was blown away by her ego. She never thought this lady would let her down again like that. The girl also confessed she got a pardon by pretending she and the heroine were working on time travel together. Genesia remembered how she used to feel guilty for treating her friend the way she did. But now, she decided their friendship was over. Done. Finished. Forever. The heroine figured friends should respect each other, but Lady Kendall always treated her like a servant. Lisbel couldn't believe she was saying that, but Genesia just started walking away in silence. Realizing she was being forced to leave without finishing her tea, Lady Kendall thought the heroine was trash with no manners. So Genesia dumped the rest of the tea from the pot right on her head, deciding now it was finished and the lady could leave in peace. Gritting her teeth and crying with shame, the girl vowed she'd pay for this. As the heroine left, she was met by Callian, who felt he should have gone to that meeting with her. But either way, he thought she handled it great. And now he wanted to grab some pie with her. The Emperor executed everyone involved in the slave trade, but Lisbel somehow dodged the axe. She was locked in the dungeons, no way to see His Majesty, which means someone delivered her message, and they needed someone who could find out who it was. And the second prince just happened to have the guy. That evening, Genesia headed to the parlor to wait for this guest to arrive. Opening the doors, she froze in shock, seeing the guy strangling Rupert and the servants, then cheerfully greeting her. He'd been told that the lady would personally repay the favor, and the chump cried himself to sleep for nights waiting. Turns out the stranger was Mirian, head of the Artir Guild, hired personally by His Highness.